Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations. Today, we'll continue our series on debt. In this series, we'll discuss balancing debt and savings. Remember, debt is highly personal and there are many aspects to consider. We're sharing information for educational and conversational purposes only and not giving specific advice. We're here to share our ideas and what works for us. So when I'm thinking about this topic of debt and savings, I get a little bit overwhelmed because they are two huge parts of our total money picture, right? And when you get overwhelmed, oftentimes we just don't end up taking action. We get stuck, right? So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they get stuck in that overwhelm. They don't work on repaying their debt or making a plan to repay their debt, and they're not saving. And what happens is when you're stuck and you're having analysis paralysis, you're just not moving you're not moving that needle forward as you need to do by either repaying some debt or adding to your savings. And so today we're going to talk about this very, very important topic because if you feel stuck, you're not alone. It's a very common feeling, and all three of us have been there in different ways at different times. So let's dive into a conversation about debt and savings.
Thanks, Sybil. This question of do I pay down my debt or do I build up my savings is one of the most popular questions that I get. I know I've shared that on previous podcast episodes as well. And I have a couple of just kind of findings that I've come across when I work with clients. One of the things is if you have a work retirement plan that provides you with a match, that is a really powerful work perk to take advantage of because you're getting free money. So that would be a situation where you might want to prioritize savings just so that you're taking advantage of that benefit that you have available to you. The other thing is sometimes people worry that they want to save and the amount that they're able to save is very little. And I always say just get started, even if it's $25. Just the key thing is that you're building this habit of saving and you can always increase the amount later. And the nice thing is when you start saving over time, you won't even notice that that amount is gone. It becomes completely normal. And sometimes people that with larger amounts of debt, they feel really defeated because they worry that they're not able to save anything. Their debt is really the number one priority that they have in their life. And that's okay because paying down debt is a form of savings. You are saving yourself future interest. You are, you're increasing your overall net worth by reducing the debt that you have. So that is still a great goal to work towards. So I just wanted to kind of share those three tidbits that come up fairly often.
Yeah, thank you, Meri-Li. That first one about company match, a lot of times people don't realize how amazing of an opportunity for savings and investing that can be. Another thing that you made me think of with that is that my husband's company pays into an HSA, and health savings account here in the United States, and that is the most tax advantage account you can get. It's triple tax advantage. So by having a high deductible healthcare plan, his school district actually puts $500 a month into our HSA. And the great thing about that is I can invest that money, and so it grows. And then you can spend that money now if you need to, or you can spend it at any time in the future. But watch out for that too. Like check out your company's benefits really, really well. Because there are sometimes things like that in there that you don't realize how much that can really help you save. That $500 a month is really growing in the stock market. And so that's saving without, me contributing things each month, right? That's on top of his salary. But if we had not really investigated and started with a different insurance plan, we wouldn't have that money growing in our HSA.
I think it's important to remember that companies consider that as part of our compensation. So when our salary is $50,000, like we often just think about the dollars that are coming, right? But we forget that the cost of insurance, money they're contributing as a match to our retirement plan, all of that is also considered compensation. So if you don't take advantage of that, you're literally leaving money on the table. There's free money available to you if you just take advantage of it. And to go back to what we always bring it back to, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're like, HSA, what is that? How do I know if I have one? A company match, what is that? How do I know if I have company match? Just ask. If you have a larger company, you'll have a human resources department, and they will be able to answer these questions for you. Just shoot them an email or stop by their office and say, I need some help. I have some questions. They are happy to help you with that, and happy to help you take advantage of those elements of your compensation. So don't leave money on the table, because to Meri-Li's point, this is money that you actually are saving without even thinking about it. It's just coming out of your check. It's going into that savings. So it kind of helps with that guilt piece of, I'm so focused on debt, I'm not saving, but you actually are saving. It's just in the background. And so I think that's really important to make sure we're taking advantage of that.
It's a great best practice to also look at your work perks that you get, so the different benefits, the different matches, at least once a year, to see if there's anything new, to see if there's anything that you could increase. So you might be saving for retirement, maybe you bump that up 1%. If you're getting a raise, so getting ahead of increases in income and directing some of that to savings is kind of another easier tactic, because you're not used to having that higher income amount yet. If you are proactive and direct a part of it to savings before it even hits your first paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the topic of savings, what else comes to mind is our emergency funds, right? An emergency fund is really a priority, needs to be a priority in our savings as well. We need to have cash ready to go. People often say 3 to 6 months, which might sound like a lot, and you don't have to get there right away. But building an emergency fund, or as Jen likes to call it, what do you call it, Jen?
Like a contingency fund or your backup fund, like something that doesn't seem like we're saving for something bad to happen.
Yes. So saving that fund for a time when you might need it, that's unexpected, right? And putting a little bit away in there at the same time as paying down some debt can really give you security of mind, but also security if you need some funds, all of a sudden they're in cash, right? And so right now, like a high yield savings account has a really high interest rate. So saving your money in a high yield savings account, your emergency fund, it can help you have that money easily accessible. It's liquid, but also be earning some money on it. Right now, the rates are at like 5% in the U.S. On those savings accounts. And so contributing a little bit, as much as you can to that, is a really important thing to consider and start looking into if you haven't already started building an emergency fund.
Yeah, I like to think of the emergency or contingency fund as the thing that helps you sleep well at night, because we will all face some type of emergency, and having the money available to you when that emergency occurs is just so much. Things are just much more calmer than having to look to credit cards or other sources of lending to get through an already stressful time. The other way to really smooth out that emotional roller coaster with money is to start thinking about some sinking funds, so some separate accounts for short-term needs that you have for yourself or for your family. So where I see people using these special accounts are for things like their kids' sports or camps, for vacations like summer vacation. So it's just setting up a separate bank account where you direct a bit of money every month. And so that when it's time to pay for those the kids' camp dues, you have the money, it's already set aside. So that can be a great way to get started with savings, is to start focusing on some of the shorter term goals.
Okay, so two things. First of all, I have never used the term sinking funds, and that is the third time I've heard it this week. So is sinking funds just a fancy term for separate small savings accounts, or is it like, what does it mean, something specific? Because I've never used it, but I keep hearing it.
I think some people use the term buckets, or they're just really separate accounts. So ideally, it's a savings account that you're not going to dip into. So maybe something that you don't have on your bank card. Maybe it's at a different financial institution, but it's just a separate account that is designated for a specific purpose. So it has a specific job. Another great use for these types of accounts is things like car repairs. That's like a big whammy that comes up for people. We had a ginormous car repair bill last month, and where these special accounts help is you've got at least some of the money set aside for when it happens, because it will. So it's just dedicated savings. It's usually just high interest savings or just a straight bank account. So you're not investing it for the very long term. The purpose of the money is to use it in within the next year.
And I like it because it is really manageable for people who are still paying off debt, but who can say, but I'm also like, it's kind of like budgeting for your immediate, like your near-term future. Like, okay, but my kids are going to have to go to camp this summer, or I'm going to have a more expensive like daycare bill this summer, right? Because I need care for my kids. That's coming up. We're going to have fall sports fees. We're going to have car repairs. And I like it because people are saving, right? You are saving, and you're developing that habit of putting money, like you use that term habit, Meri-Li, and I thought that was such a great way to think about it. Even if you're saving $5 a month, you're building that habit. So I love that you could start to think about putting this money aside in these little funds while you're also focusing on debt. That'll make the expense when it pops up so much less alarming, and you won't feel as panicked because you're like, look at me, I planned for the $500 baseball fee or whatever it is, but it's also that building that habit. So it's helping you balance I want to pay off my debt, big expenses are coming down the path, I need to save. Like, there's so many things you can think about at once. And this is a great way to kind of ease yourself into that.
Yeah. And what you're shifting is being reactive. So having everything happen to you, like, oh, shoot, I forgot that, my dog has a pet visit coming up, and that's going to be $500. Because, by the way, pet care expenses are very large. It's shifting away from like reactive, where things just pop up on you, to being more proactive. And the easiest way to start is with those near-term needs and goals that you have, and having the money set aside to be prepared for them. So this is where you gain control of over your finances versus all of these things happening to you.
I love that. And it's so true. And then you start to feel so much more in control, right? Like you said. And then you're not as tempted or needing to go into more debt, right? When you're paying off debt, you want to think about also, how do I not add more debt in the future? So these strategies of saving at the same time will really help your mindset and your actual plan of not having to go more in debt when these events occur, or when you're ready to make those payments on sports, etc. Yeah.
I also wanted to then think about some of the longer term goals. And on the debt side, most people tend to focus on the higher interest consumer type debts first. And then the last debt that many of us have is our mortgage. And this is a very interesting time point that people face when they're faced with the decision of do we pay our mortgage down faster, or do we put more money towards savings? And I find that what sets people apart here is really their risk tolerance. So a lot of people feel much more at peace with their finances when they don't have any debt. And other people don't mind having mortgage debt and putting more money aside towards longer term savings for things like their retirement, renovations, major vacations, weddings, things like that.
One question that we did get was about planning to pay for a wedding and all the different ways you could do it. Do you just try to only pay cash? Do you get a loan? Do you use a credit card? How do you manage all of that? And I think that a wedding is just an example. It's like we could take out the word wedding and pop in the word like renovation or vacation or whatever. How do you go about like planning to pay for all that? And a wedding in particular, because there's all these little pieces leading up, right? You have to put down deposits depending on how large your wedding is and what you're planning to do. Sometimes you have to like pay for things ahead of time. Sometimes a lot of money is due on the day of. There's all these aspects, right? Paying a dress, you do that ahead. So I think that there are tons of options. You really just have to look at all of them, maybe even write them all down so you can see all of your options in front of you and then make a decision. So if you're comfortable, like Meri-Li said, carrying a little bit of debt and the wedding is a place that you're comfortable, I don't want it to sound negative, but like making a sacrifice of carrying debt, and I don't necessarily mean that negatively, because it's important to you, then you could decide what amount of money am I comfortable with carrying debt for to pay for this wedding. If you're not comfortable with that, then maybe make a list of all, like how much money a month could you put towards the wedding, and then start putting that money into those sinking funds or your wedding bucket. And, so that every month you're contributing a little bit to that you can pull from it when those things are due. And maybe you come up with a balance of that. Maybe you're like, you know what, there's a few things I'm going to put on a credit card and I'm just going to pay them off over the next year or 6 months or whatever your plan is. And then I'm going to pay for as many things as I can with cash leading up to it. But I really think you have to just come up with what's right for you. I know there are people who take out a loan for X amount of dollars and that's their wedding money. And then they just use that money for the wedding, and the money they would have spent every month, they just use towards paying it back. So you really just have to think about all of your options and what makes the most sense for you and what makes you most comfortable. Do not, on your wedding day or on your big vacation or standing in your new kitchen, stand there with huge regrets about the way you paid for it, right? So doing some planning ahead of time will make it to the point where when you get there, you're enjoying the wedding, you're enjoying the kitchen or the vacation because you feel really good about how you strategized your payment for this, instead of just like, throwing caution to the wind, putting the entire thing on a credit card, and now you're freaking out about how you're going to pay for it. I really think planning and thinking about all your options in advance is kind of the way to go with these types of things.
Yeah, and I would add on thinking about how much you're willing to spend for each item. Like a wedding, we have flowers, we have the venue, we have, right, all of the things. And so really thinking about what are the most important pieces for you first, and then how much money are you going to allot or budget or allow yourself to spend in each of the areas. Because if you really go in either saying, I'm going to spend as much as I need to get this, but then that means I'm going to have to spend less on these other things, or the opposite, I'm going to spend a little less on everything, right? But really, what's your overall budget? Like Jen said, what are you willing to take some debt for, or what are you willing to not? And then so how am I going to allocate those funds? And trying to have future empathy for yourself. So think 5 years after the wedding, 5 years after the renovation. Are you going to be glad that you spent that much money? Or if you had spent a little less, would you feel the same in the same place, right? So have some empathy for yourself and try to do some thinking about the spending as well, how much you're willing to spend for which quality or which items, things like that.
That is a great tip. Instantly 72 things popped into my brain. So I'm just going to share a couple quick examples. One, for our wedding, I was like, I don't care there was a bunch of things I didn't care about. I really wanted to spend money on a photographer because I was like, the pictures are the only thing I'm walking away from this day with. And so to me, that was where my priority was, these pictures. And then I made a lot of stuff myself because I was like, I don't really care as much about that. Like, it'll be totally fine if I make it, but I won't have to, it'll let me put more money to the things that matter most. So that kind of priority list. Same with travel. Are you going to be in your hotel room ever? Or is this the kind of vacation where you're just always on the go? If you're always on the go, you don't need to pay for an expensive room. But if it's the kind where you're just going to spend a lot of time lounging and relaxing in that hotel room and taking in that vibe, that's the kind where you spend a little more. You know, renovations. Are you really going to regret that you went with the $10 square foot tile versus the $40 square foot tile when you're in the shower every morning? Like, you know, I think that thinking about your future self and what you're going to think about in the future is like a huge piece for almost every money related item, right? Like, how is future me going to feel about this spend that I'm doing right now or this savings that I'm doing? That is great advice. I want to like write it across the top of my like budget sheet. How is future you going to feel about this?
Yeah, it's a great thing to just have up on the wall or on your budget sheet because we forget it so easily, right? We're in the moment of making the decision on how much and what we're going to purchase. Sometimes it's just what we're going to purchase. We don't even care about the cost. Like you said, if it's a real priority, like photography, you're more willing to spend more money. But if we do that on everything, then all of a sudden we don't have a budget or we spent way more than we should have, right? Yeah, and that brings me to 4 strategies that I like to use to think about this balance between how much I'm saving and how much I'm repaying my debt. And the first one is to set up automatic payments. So by setting up automatic payments, either repayments on your debt or payments into a savings account, it takes away the emotional aspect, right? You don't have to sit there and say, should I put it here? Should I put it there? I don't have enough. $5 won't make a difference, right? This is the kind of like emotional negative self-talk that we get stuck in. So if you actually just set up, I'm going to make X amount of a payment on my debt every month, and I set it up to go out automatically, I will not have to worry about the emotional piece, and I will make sure I budget so that that payment can go out. And with automatic payments, what I recommend is setting them up right after you get your paycheck. Now, I understand if you have a variable income, you might not get a set amount on a set date, so that makes it a little bit harder. But look back a few months and see, like, when do I have enough funds to set up those automatic payments? Maybe it's the 15th of the month, maybe it's the 1st of the month. But that really helps take away the emotional element, and it helps with the consistency. You don't look back and say, oops, I haven't paid off my debt in 3 months, right? It helps consistently chip away at it or add to your savings. The second one is to really pay attention to your interest rates and then make decisions based on those numbers. So I wouldn't do this frequently, especially if you're setting up automatic payments, but every once in a while, pay attention to that. Where are the interest rates now? For example, yesterday I just moved my emergency fund to another high yield savings account that I already had. It's actually a money market within our brokerage account. And I realized that high yield savings account was paying 1% more than the where I had my emergency fund already. Well, that's another almost $100 a month. So I just went ahead and moved that over, and I just made that decision based on the numbers. I looked at the interest rates. I already had that account, so it was literally a matter of moving it over to that account. Another big piece is celebrating small milestones. We've got to cheer ourselves on. We got to be our best cheerleaders and celebrate. I did it for 3 months. I've been paying away my debt, or for 3 months, I've been building my emergency savings account. For 3 months, I've been investing in the stock market, right? And then just really the fourth one is to get your plan in place. No matter what plan you have, you will make progress if you get it started and in place, right? If you make a plan, you're going to achieve what you want to achieve and meet those goals. And so get that plan in place and get started. even the smallest amounts start working for you. And again, like we talked, I think in last week's episode, that motivation to see that you are ticking away at those numbers or adding to that savings account is a huge part of your money mindset, and will really end up overall affecting how you spend and how you save and how you pay off your debt as a whole financial picture, right? The motivation is really, really an important part of that. So thanks for joining us today in a conversation about saving and paying off debt, trying to decide how much and which one to do. And what we're really thinking about and talking about is how can we do both? How can we work towards both in a sustainable way for you? So remember, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us your thoughts, your questions. Be sure to like and subscribe our podcast so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And we're looking forward to chatting with you next time.